in Chinaccelerator, we work with companies in cohorts. So every 6 months, we bring a group of 12 to 15 new startups. We keep working with the startups that already went through this acceleration process, but the ones that we work constantly is 15 companies. Right now, we are actually next week we're having the demo day, which is one of the highlight moments in the program. It's not the end of the program; it happens at the middle of the program, where it becomes like a reality check for the company. So we're working with 14 companies right now. We were originally 15, but COVID situation made some of the companies request to change and potentially come to the program in 6 months in the second half of the year. And in terms of demographics, it's actually very very interesting in terms of what the age. So the average age of the founders going through the program is like 35, 36 years old. So they are not super young entrepreneurs that sometimes people expect. On one side, reality is that the average age of the successful entrepreneurs is way higher. So entrepreneurship is actually something very difficult. There is a component of inspiration and creativity, but there's a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, a lot of knowing about the industry and identifying very rational opportunities and then running things with best practices. That doesn't mean that younger people cannot do it. Younger people has the ability to create massive disruption sometimes because you don't know that is possible. I mean, when I came here and I did what I did, if I look back, I thought, well, that's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. And I did it because I didn't know how difficult it was. So age is actually, I mean, we have some younger founders. We have some founders on their like early 20s, and we have some founders in their late 50s. But I'll say not just the average, but a good representation of the typical age is in their mid 30s when they have experience. They also have reputation and credibility. That is probably maybe a bit skewed to high compared to other accelerators, among other things, because we do a lot of work with companies in the enterprise and B2B sector that normally is less sexy for younger founders, and it's also more difficult because you need to go and sell to other businesses that normally trust plays a very important role in that process. So they want to make sure that whoever is giving them a product is somebody that they can relate to. Even some of the younger funders that they also have enterprise solution or B2B solutions, and they sell like software as a service that doesn't require any type of face-to-face sales. They might sometimes also create an image of a perception of an older and more experienced team to be able to overcome those type of prejudices.
For all our viewers out there who would like to participate in the China Accelerator, what is the selection criteria? How can they qualify? What are you looking for when it comes to internet startups?
Well, in our case, we look for companies that are in a specific stage. So, I mean, Chinaccelerator is part of a larger organization called SOSV. And SOSV is a global investor. It's a global venture capital fund that invests everywhere in the world, multi-industry, no geographic focus, and specializing in technology stacks. So for us, the internet ecosystem is part of the software ecosystem, and building today a software product, building an existing initial prototype, and have initial users is something relatively easy. So the real obstacle is scaling that product. So we look for companies that are solving a real problem, something that someone needs, that at least have the ball rolling. And our goal is really accelerate. We don't incubate ideas, we accelerate companies. Then those companies in this process of acceleration might change radically what I do. Thanks to people like Geoffrey and this mentor structure, we take companies through a process, but the magic ingredient of that process are the mentors, are the alumni, are all of these people that help funders think about their business in a different way. An interesting fact is that all of the companies that have raised a Series A that went through a program, they did that by changing their business model. So a Series A is like a first large institutional round of investors, where investors will evaluate the companies with a bit more strict criteria than the ones that sometimes individual angels could potentially use. And that is a validation of, okay, somebody that knows a lot about the space believes that rationally what you do has a big market opportunity.
Right. That's very interesting because Geoffrey, you have seen this, as you mentioned, since the 90s. Chinese, traditionally, throughout culture, we are very security driven. Love families, and you want to provide for the families, and so that is a contradiction in a way to entrepreneurial spirit. In the past, particularly the past decade or so, we're starting to see more people leave their job to enter into the entrepreneurial space. What do you think has changed for them? What is the consensus in entrepreneurship that it's fundamentally changed the Chinese culture today?
I don't know. It's a thing that I often ponder with, because we say that it's kind of antithetical to the Chinese culture. But then when you think about it, you look at every country in the world, there's a Chinatown. And in that Chinatown are thriving businesses, right? There, when you think of what's, when you think to yourself about from a laundromat to a corner shop to pirate DVDs or CDs, you think about Chinese people doing business and being very shrewd at doing business. So in the same breath, we say that we like security and we like a steady path, but also we're damn good at finding opportunities and making money. Now, Oscar made a good point, though. He said, building a product is very easy today. Building a business is much harder. So making money is easy, right? Making money isn't building a business. Building a business is something that's very different. And that's the difference, I think, when you're talking about entrepreneurs and getting involved. Why has that changed? I think for a start, it's changed because we as Chinese people ourselves have become a bit more confident in who we are, a bit more pride in ourselves, both domestically but also on the global stage, because we've been bolstered by founders, the first generation, the guys like Jack Ma and Tony Ma and that, who have built the first batch of Chinese companies that went global. We've also got, returning graduates, and also the returning sea turtles, the ones that have graduated in the States 20 years ago but never came back. They're starting to come back and bring back their skills and their passion and their dreams, and their inspirations as well. When they come back, they serve as an inspiration. I think that those things combined, but also a self-determination. We realize that this world's ours. It's ours to help shape, create, contribute. And if we don't do those things, we will forever just be making things for other people, right? It just so happens, fortunately, we were lucky enough to have this revelation a decade ago. Otherwise, this trade war situation right now, we'd be in a very different position. We'd be in a very scary situation if we hadn't started to build our own companies, our own technologies, and our own processes and our own best practices.
So let me ask you, Jeff and Oscar, because you're helping to accelerate businesses and establish, new startups. Is there one company or one business or one founder that you are extremely proud of, or maybe even somebody like Jack Ma in the world of business that you're really taking as a role model?
Internally, we always say that we cannot have favorites. All our startups they're all or children, and they're all equally beautiful, and we work with them and we try to help as much as we can. But of course, there are different founders that I think they're very, very inspirational, and I think they're a good example of the whole spirit of entrepreneurship. Okay, and I'm probably it's a bit of a cliche because this founder is also the founder of the best performing startup in the whole Chinaccelerator and the whole SOSV portfolio. But I'll say the founding team of BitMEX, the three founders of BitMEX, one of our companies, based on the revenue that they have today, close to becoming not just a unicorn but a decacorn. This company is extremely inspirational, and the reason why it's inspirational is because this company never raised any money after the program. In the startup world, sometimes founders confuse the raising money with building a company, and that's exactly what Geoffrey was talking about. I mean, you can have like small transactions, but building a system that is repeatable and scalable, and doing that in an economically sustainable way, it's something very, very difficult that requires discipline. So the founding team of BitMEX joined the program with a small revenue per week, and they left the program with a 50x increase in what they were doing in just 12 weeks. That discipline. And by the way, this company changed their business model. When they joined the program, they were a B2B company, and they left the program as a B2C company, targeting very different type of demographic. So they were very open, they were very disciplined. You see the three founders and the dynamics they have between the how they complement each other, how they communicated with each other, and how they were able to build a company that today is on the space is the global market leader without having to raise any additional funding compared to their competitors that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. That for me is something extremely admirable and an extremely inspirational story. The founders own today 94% of the company. We own 6% of the company. Everybody's very happy.
So, you gentlemen, you both have talked about the war of talents. On top of all the geopolitical rhetorics that we see in the world today, there is a fundamental competition over the best talents in the world. How do we draw the best talents from Silicon Valley back to China? What is pulling them back?
Well, I think the dynamism of the market is making certain returnees coming back here. There's certain advantage that China have in some industries that just make it the best place to build a company today. There's a in some areas there's a price advantage that is very relevant in China. There's a market advantage depending on the type of services that you're building. Whereas in other parts of the world, you have to explain people what are you doing. Here, there's a lot of areas where China has literally leapfrogged other parts of the world. So I'm not saying that everybody needs to come here for the same for every single industry, but there are areas of the world that they just have an inherent competitive advantage because they are the best place to do that. So showing and educating people about that, it's very important. In terms of bringing international talent, that is a different story. I think there is still some challenges in terms of making that viable. That requires some modifications. So basically, international companies feel more welcome, and they are in a situation where they don't think that being here is a disadvantage for them.
So in terms of Chinaccelerator itself, post the COVID-19, you have talked about, Oscar, to have a concept of a mobile accelerator and perhaps in the whole accelerator space altogether. In the future, we're not going to have a whole bunch of entrepreneurs coming in, sharing a desk and doing meetings, coffees. Maybe we're all going to be working from home and connecting with each other and experts remotely.
I mean, I personally believe that blended is a way to go. We were already working in a blended model where we take advantage of the flexibility of work, not just from home, but from wherever is more relevant and every time or every moment or every stage of development of the company. But at the same time, the human factor is very important. Startups is a lot about trust. The trust that Geoffrey is able to get with the companies and the companies have on Geoffrey. This element of the interaction on the coaching and open up and accepting, I might need to change it because I decided to jump into the pool of entrepreneurship with certain assumptions and certain ideas. And now I need to accept that those ideas are wrong. And I might need to change them. That is a scary movement. And you need to do that in an environment where you feel comfortable and you trust the people. There's also a lot of elements where information happens in a very subjective way. So the process of innovation, and startups are in a constant process of innovation, is a structured process that has a lot of serendipity. So you engineer having moments where things are not pre-planned, but magic happens. So you put the right ingredients, and suddenly the final result is good. If you have the right people at the right time doing the right things. You don't know the output, but something will happen.
So Geoffrey, you have been a veteran entrepreneur and very successfully. Over the past 20 years, the world has fundamentally changed over and over and getting faster and faster. And so you have to, in a way, I think in a very strong way, to be convinced that you continue to be on top of this global technological chain, but no one knows everything. I mean, the technology that are coming up today perhaps are very, very different from what you were familiar with when you got started. And so people would have to trust your advice. There's some sort of timeless wisdom in entrepreneurship, particularly in tech entrepreneurship, that you can always impart that are always successful.
Yeah, there's always someone that knows more than I do. I'm generally wrong before I'm right, and I absolutely need to be open to be learning constantly. Now, that's advice I give myself, and those are those three things are what I impart to people around me, because, like you said, the world is constantly changing, and so the only way you can stay up on things is a combination of those three things. It's humility, asking for input from other people, and then constant learning. That's something that I think is interesting. When I first meet founders, entrepreneurs, either through the program or through our own due diligence of the fund, I try to find out who they are as a human. Less about their business or less about their results and their success, who they are as a human, to see if they have what I think it takes to make a good entrepreneur. And that's probably one of the first few things that I'll ask is something to do with learning. How much time they spend learning new things, reading, writing, and that's very telling for me. Because if a person doesn't learn new things constantly, and I don't care if you're building a high growth business and you've got so many things to do, learning needs to be a part of an entrepreneur's job. And if you're not doing that, then your chances of being successful are limited.
Very good advice. And so Elon Musk, recently I was watching one of his interviews. Well, who wouldn't want to be Elon Musk in the entrepreneurial world? But translating your wisdom, Geoffrey and Oscar, somebody like Jack Ma, do you think they exhibit a strong sense of humility? I mean, do you think that they actually take advice very well? Do you see that in them?
Yeah. So one of my partners is one of the founders of Didi. Didi is by all accounts one of the most valuable companies in the world, one of China's largest technology unicorns, and also one famously for successfully defeating their American counterpart, Uber, and kicking them out of China. So you would think he's up there, and yet he is one of the most humble people I know, constantly learning. From founders in our portfolio, constantly learning and challenging himself. So yeah, I think that absolutely, to be successful, as I said earlier on, you need to be arrogant, you need to be passionate, you need to be confident, but you still need to have humility and to foster that learning, that continual learning.
Because being a one-hit wonder, that can happen overnight, right? But really maintaining that high level, facing the competition and stay up there for years and decades, that is a different ballgame for sure.
Well, a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you that that overnight success takes a lot of time. So overnight success is what is shown outside, but overnight success takes a lot of time. I'll actually agree with what based on my experience meeting a lot of successful entrepreneurs, that humility is actually a very common trait of that you find entrepreneurs. But you need to understand humility in a different way. First, every entrepreneur has a level of arrogancy. Starting a company is a suicide mission. If you look at the statistics, most of the people that start a company, they will fail because the numbers say that you will fail. And when you start a company, knowing that most likely you will fail is because you believe you can do better. And that is great. That is important. And sometimes there's a bit of naiveness, but there's always a bit of arrogancy. And this is fundamental. Without that, nothing will ever get started. Then,
or maybe instead of arrogance, a different word starting with A would be ambition, right? So they really need to be ambitious and driven.
Call it as you want, but at the end of the day, there's somebody that believes that they can do better than the majority of the people. But the journey of entrepreneurship is a cure of humility, because it's a very bumpy road. So as I said, like the overnight success takes a lot of time to happen. So people talk about Angry Birds. and Angry Birds as a company that was so successful really, really fast. Where Angry Birds was the game number 50 that company that Robbie built. So that overnight success, which was Angry Birds, took for them long time to create. And we were talking this morning with one of our podcast guests about the journey, one of the earliest investors in Pinduoduo, and we're talking about the journey of Pinduoduo and how they started with a very, very, very different business model, and then over time, that humility of saying I have to change and I need to do things differently, that was fundamental. So this humility, this innate curiosity to learn and to find out new things, to understand the why of things, is an element that is what can take you eventually to real success and to maintain you like in a very like high performance position for a long time.
There's a lot to learn about entrepreneurship as universities all over the world try to teach this, but I guess it's a lot of gut feeding and it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of really mentorship, isn't it? To have people help post the COVID-19. You both have talked a lot about the online space, and of course, China is going. I think doubling down on digitizing the economy, online education, online gaming, online entertainment, online everything. In your actual business on the ground, where do you see most of the entrepreneurs are focusing on at the moment, and where do you see, homemade, some of the major threads of opportunity for the next decade?
I think we'll start to see a lot of interesting things happening in the EV space, electric vehicles, in and around the wider area of that. I think it's starting to open up a lot more doors for smaller companies to be building out of there. I think anything to do with food security, food safety. So if you think about the trade war and its negative implications from a macro level, one of the opportunities is building our own versions or our own things in China of the things that we were reliant on the West from previously. And so there are opportunities inherently there to be built, for companies to be built. But that knowledge doesn't exist in China in a lot of cases. So therefore, it provides an opportunity for foreign founders or foreign startups to be able to play a role in helping to cultivate a domestic industry or build a domestic business.
Yeah, well, we kind of reinvent ourselves. So every single time we run a program, and we run 2 every year, we change 20% of what we do and the way we operate by design, because if you don't innovate, you die. So what we used to do 3 years ago is quite different than what we do today. Certain things are they're at a concept, they're the same. The values, the principles remain the same, but we do a lot of things quite differently in terms of the way we operate. And that, for example, links to what you were talking about opportunities. And we see this. We used to be more in the B2C, and right now we're moving more in the B2B, because we see as China matures and the whole ecosystem and evolves and changes, there's a need for more productivity and more efficiency, which is driving a lot the interest of both SMEs and enterprises to digitalize and change the way they operate.